Hi, and welcome to the ADHD Kids Can Thrive podcast, real talk, practical tools, and hopeful stories for parents and educators supporting kids with ADHD. I'm Kate Brownfield, your host and a certified whole person and ADHD parent coach. It's my joy to bring you advocates and experts in ADHD to help you on your own journey. For resources and coaching, visit ADHDkidscanthrive.com. Now, please enjoy this conversation. Hi. Today, my guest is Julia Ross. She's a best-selling author, a mood and craving expert. She's a pioneer in the use of nutrient therapies to target food cravings and problems related to mood, sleep, and addiction. She's the director of several integrative clinics in the San Francisco Bay Area since the 80s. She now directs a worldwide virtual clinic and training programs for health professionals. Her books are titled The Mood Cure, The Diet Cure, and The Craving Cure. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We're going to focus our conversation today on her book, which I have personally enjoyed for many years, called The Mood Cure. So we're going to get into it today, Julia. So let's just start from the beginning about who you are, how you've become so passionate and made a huge impact in the world of nutritional therapy with using amino acid supplements as part of a treatment plan for people who really struggle, in this case, with their mood.
I'm happy to be with you and to focus on the problems of adults and children with attention deficit and or hyperactivity and or anger problems.
Yeah.
But that's not where I started. And those in your audience who take your suggestions and go to the Mood Cure will find information about all of these things that I've just mentioned, different aspects of ADHD. But I've also learned a lot since that book was published in 2004. And so I want people to feel free to go to my website, juliarosscures.com, and see some of the additional e-publications that I've been putting out, especially over the last year, which is the anniversary of the publication of the Mood Cure. And it's just being sold in China this year.
That's amazing.
It's got eternally relevant information in it. And I had a lot of fun writing it. But it's not the end of the story, and particularly not the end of the story in terms of ADHD, which is why I'm very glad to be talking with you. ADHD was pretty much unknown when I was trained in clinical psychology in the 1970s. But we were blessed at that time with a whole plethora of psychological techniques that were completely revolutionary. So prior to that, we had Freudian analysis, Jungian analysis, but we didn't have psychotherapy as we know it now, where we actually sit down and talk with someone, go through processes and exercises. And it was a very, very exciting time in that mid-1970s period. While I was an intern or getting my master's in clinical psychology in San Francisco, I was invited to become an intern staff member in pretty much the only treatment program for alcoholics in the city. And San Francisco is a big city, and this was a beautiful 4-story Victorian with a wonderful basic program, long-term residential for people who could work, go to school, or volunteer, 3 good meals every day, and the 12-step programs. And that was it. So we were invited to introduce all these new psychological techniques into the world of alcoholism, which I knew nothing about. But they taught us, there were several of us, about addiction to alcohol. At that time was the only drug of concern. And we taught them about these wildly exciting individual, family, and group processes that revolutionized the program. Nobody could go home after the groups. They just wanted to talk some more.
Okay.
It was so exciting. And we were sort of the most, it was a nonprofit, so there was no profit motive. We could do whatever we wanted. We didn't have to save money. And when the addiction industry took over in the late 70s, early 80s, that was all profit motive, and things deteriorated after that in terms of treatment. But when follow-ups were done initially, we had between 60 and 75% long-term abstinence with our alcoholic clients. And I want to make a note here to say that later on, I understood that the increasing rate of addiction that has really overwhelmed us since that time, since the early 80s when cocaine and crack came out, that corresponded to the deterioration of our diet. At some point in the 70s, most people started giving up the traditional foods that we've grown up with: whole milk, meatloaf for dinner. There was this emphasis on low fat, vegetarian. Radical shifts were taking place. And I believe that those shifts have exacerbated every single psychological seeming problem that existed or didn't exist in the 70s. So some brand new things, many brand new things, and such severity that we're suffering now. So I want to tell you how I got from, launching into this exciting world, presenting the world, successfully with these psychological techniques. And then in the 80s, as I mentioned, we got cocaine addiction. And that was the end of my career as a successful innovator in the addiction world as a psychotherapist. Because what we learned was psychotherapy was entirely unsuccessful. The 12 steps were not nearly as successful with cocaine as with alcohol addiction. And so we were experiencing 100% relapse rates within 24 hours. People would come in begging for help and leave 24 hours later, totally foreign to anything we'd ever experienced before, because this particular drug was much more powerful than alcohol.
Yeah.
Its addictiveness. So here's where this terrible dynamic that has plagued us ever since, with additional completely uncontrollable addictive substances, opiates, for example, and 100% THC cannabis. What that thrust us into was despair. What are we going to do for these people? Our current tools don't help. And here's where I became an innovator in nutrition. This is the time where the brand new science, neuroscience, the study of the brain and how it generates mood and how it affects our appetite for food, for alcohol, for drugs,
Carbs.
So the scientists, there were scientists all over the world studying together and learning. And the people who were benefiting from this were the pharmaceutical industry, which started designing antidepressants at that point based on this new science, and the nutrition industry, which started making supplements that were directly related to the way the brain was failing to operate, that turned out to be tremendously potent, tremendously beneficial. And eventually this led to a clash between the pharmaceutical industry and the nutrition industry. And
oh, interesting. What are some supplements that were like this is powerful as like
it was
pharmaceutical
just a
drug?
small group of supplements. And this is what's so fascinating about it. We're so intimidated by the brain. We see it as this truly, billions of cells operating our entire being. But in fact, what the neuroscientists reported to us when they came around to the lecture to the addiction professionals in the country, and they said, don't be intimidated. The brain chemistry that controls mood and cravings is very simple. And one of them in particular did studies showing that the nutrients that they had discovered, which fed the 5 parts of the brain that control our moods and our cravings and appetites, are very simple and take effect immediately, restore normal function, even to people who have a genetic problem, say with ADHD or with alcoholism or some combination, mental illness. So I was extremely intrigued. It was the only hope that we had. So there were a number of us in the country who jumped on board and said, we're going to try the nutritional supplements approach. I happened to have just hired a nutritionist because I figured diet had something to do with this, but improving diet didn't really change anything. But she knew something about supplements. She did the research. She said, there's no reason not to use these. It's totally safe. So we started out with the one supplement that we needed for cocaine recovery. So that was a supplement that would restore the part of the brain that gives us energy and focus. And this amino acid, one of the 20 amino acids that protein-rich foods should be supplying us. If we were eating anything but carbs, we would be in much better shape because we'd be getting the protein that all of these 5 nutrients I'm about to tell you about are derived from. But the supplement industry had been able to create a concentrate of this particular one. It's called tyrosine. And tyrosine was the cure for cocaine addiction. There was a study done that I won't go into the details on it, but it was stunning what tyrosine did to an inpatient program of cocaine addicts. Completely turned it around from 40% AWOL rates to 4%.
Wow, that's significant.
It's very significant. So that's why we said, okay, we're on board. We're going to try this. The first client we tried it with came back after a week and said, this is the first week in 5 years I haven't used cocaine. So you can see why in my desperation to then turn around and see these kinds of potential results using nutrition. So we continued to do counseling. They continued to do 12-step programs. They did residential treatment if they needed it, outpatient. I was the director of outpatient programs at that point, and I was working with adolescents and adults, and we had a handle on cocaine addiction. And there were other programs like the Haight-Ashbury Clinic, which everyone knew about in the whole country because of the flower children and, turning into heroin addicts. And then they started this clinic to help them, flower children who were so addicted. And it turned into quite an impressive treatment program. So they went for the aminos too, and they saw the same thing. In fact, they used them before I did.
Okay. And did they change the diet too to be more protein rich?
No, because they were all outpatient. They couldn't affect the diet.
Okay.
And
they could only affect their giving them a supplement.
Chemistry it was an improvement, but it wasn't anything like we got because we had the diet and we had these nutrient concentrates. They were using a blend of different aminos, which weren't as potent, but they still got great results. And I heard about it and it, encouraged me in the direction that I ended up going. But our program used the concentrates, the individual concentrates one at a time. And we still do that. In fact, people can go to my YouTube channel and watch our nutritionists trialing people on these 5 amino acids, depending on their mood problems, attention problems, addiction problems, mostly food addiction. So at this point, we realized that tyrosine was wonderful, but that our alcohol clients didn't really respond to it. And our new cannabis addicts didn't respond to it. And our food addicts, because we were starting a program to support people who were switching from alcohol or cocaine or whatever to food. We had cocaine addicts who were gaining 30 pounds in the first 30 days in our residential program. And it was only through eating the drug-like fast food and, candies ice cream, that sort of thing, that they could withstand the cravings for cocaine for any length of time at
Yeah.
all. Tells you how potent
Food
our
is.
our food became by then. So
Yeah.
we're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. And already the tobacco industry had purchased the snack food industry in this country and was applying the knowledge that it had gained about the use of different sugars to increase addictiveness. So that's where it all started. And we were watching it without understanding what was happening at the time. But we had these solutions. So we went back to the well, the neuroscience first aid, and said, what else have you got? What about people who aren't struggling with fatigue and inattention? What about people who, and cocaine addiction? What about these other addicts and people who are more depressed or more anxious, more
Yeah.
stressed? And what about attention problems that were starting to really proliferate?
Do you think, is your analysis that attention problems are all kind of corresponding to the changes that you've seen just in our world and environment between the 70s and the 80s? With the way we
I
eat?
would say the majority
Yeah.
is not genetic because because it wasn't just that we altered the diet we've altered it so radically that we're just not getting. Our diet has been analyzed by an international panel and found to be 60% nutrient void. That means to make adequate attention, to make adequate happiness, to make anything.
Less anxious, less depressed.
Yeah,
less
we're
moody.
60% deficient.
Yeah.
We can't do it. And that means that there are genetic traits that would never have expressed themselves in the past with good nutrition.
Yeah.
That are coming to the fore. And they have no business being here now.
Yeah. But they're here. Is this related to our soil too? Not to go off. Is this related to
sure
process?
It is. You know, the chemicals that are in our food and in our soil. Yes. But the fact is that we're not eating food. We're not even eating the healthful food that we could be eating because we're addicted to these nutrient void, high carbohydrate, ultra processed drug like substances.
Yeah.
We're addicted. We can't choose to eat even the food grown on poor soil that would be an improvement on a pure sugar diet. So I'd rather not get into that because I'm not.
We'll stay focused here, Julia, but I had to ask just in the analysis.
It's a very good question. And frankly, I think the emphasis on food additives and taking them out is excellent, but it ignores the primary nutritional problem that we're having, which is starvation. We can't, and food addiction, we cannot choose good food at this point because the foods we're eating are addictive, but they're produced by companies that are monumentally influential and wealthy.
Yeah.
And to get them to pull back on the sugar content, the things that they need to do to make the food less addictive is going to mean that they are less profitable. And that's the dilemma. So I have to march in with a solution. Don't change the food, just change your brain. And that can be easily done. We saw it with cocaine addiction and the amino acid tyrosine, which is inexpensive, by the way, and which no one needs to use permanently. Our cocaine addicts use tyrosine and 3 meals a day, and they stopped using it, typically within 6 months. So to give you an idea, I remember one of the cocaine addicts, he was a dentist and got into cocaine and ended up, being thrown out of his home and his beautiful children, and came to our program, gained the 30 pounds in 30 days, and then started taking tyrosine. And about 3 months later, I was driving down the street and I turned to my right and he was driving a car with his 2 beautiful twin boys, all of them radiantly healthy and happy. And I knew that he was doing well, but to actually see him was, just so thrilling.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
tyrosine is found in meat, right? Certain kinds
oh,
of meat.
yes, let's talk about what kinds of protein give us the most amino acids. Those are animal proteins. So, dairy products, meat, fish, poultry, all of them, preferably eaten together. Fish one night, meat one night, chicken to get the benefits of all of the different proteins and fatty acids. But when we go towards vegetable proteins, beans, grains, they have much less protein content and they don't have all of the proteins. And the protein and this is true of protein powders made from plants as well. They
Oh,
miss
yeah. Yeah.
some of these amino acids entirely, even though they're concentrates. So,
So we need the meat. If you're neurodiverse with mood issues, which would be anxiety, depression, anger, you need meat.
you need meat.
You need animal protein.
Animal protein. It doesn't, not only meat, all of them are wonderful, but meat is particularly critical for those of us who are O blood types. The A, which is, the most common
Yeah.
and the oldest. The A blood types can tolerate and digest vegetable proteins much better, but they still need the animal protein as well. So, what's the protein, the amino acid that's missing in these new foods that we're eating? We're encouraged to eat, starting in the 70s and progressively more as vegetarianism caught on, which is, a very new diet, completely unresearched. So what these foods are missing is an amino acid that is the hardest for us to get from food. So we really, really need these animal products in order to get enough tryptophan, which is the precious. Scientists even call it the 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 light, the light in the brain.
Okay.
It was a very early atom apparently to appear, and they go rhapsodic on how wonderful the amino acid tryptophan is and what it does that really impacts us the most is that it's the only nutrient that the brain can make our natural serotonin, our natural antidepressant, our natural anti-anxiety, our natural sleep promoter. It does all of these things and more. It eliminates irritability. And in the case of ADHD in particular, it eliminates hyperactivity.
Okay, these are all the symptoms of what define ADHD.
Well, it does not
All the things.
improve attention. So
Okay,
tyrosine
but
is
these
needed
are
for the attention deficit, but tryptophan is needed for the depression, the anxiety, the
irritability,
irritability,
all
and
the other things you
activity
said.
and hyperactivity.
Yeah.
I've
Restlessness.
had several children brought to me by their parents who did not have attention deficit, but they were so hyperactive that when the mothers brought them in to the office, they would run around the desk, but stay completely focused on what we were talking about. And we're perfectly happy to trial the amino acids that they seem to need. And when they trialed a form of tryptophan, they sat down next to their mother.
Okay.
So this is important for slowing things down. But when it comes to attention, we need to speed some things up. So that's where tyrosine comes in.
Yeah. Okay. And what food, just give us a quick little, like, where does tryptophan show up in our
Only from
food?
animal foods.
Okay. Okay.
It's there's some in soy products, but most people can't digest them well. It's a very difficult bean to digest. So no wonder we have these epidemics of depression, anxiety, and hyperactivity,
Irritability,
irritability. So we'll
anger.
get to irritability because there's another wonderful, wonderful nutrient assist for irritability. So let's go to the next part of the brain that's so critical, particularly for ADHD, but more and more for everyone, is our natural tranquilizer, our anti-stress neurotransmitter, the brain chemical that smooths down the stress. And that has a long name, but we call it GABA for short, gamma aminobutyric acid. But GABA will get you what you need because, again, the supplement industry makes tryptophan in two different forms. It makes GABA in sublingual forms at a very low dose, which is what we recommend for children, and in a 500 milligram dose for adults. Again, we have this immediate in the room. In the YouTube recordings, you'll see people just sitting back and relaxing immediately.
Does this help with sleep too?
It can.
If you have a hard time going, yeah.
So here's how it helps sleep and agitation and stress, and how it helps with attention deficits. You'd think that something that relaxed us wouldn't be so good for somebody, who's struggling to be attentive. But it turns out that GABA reduces the amounts of unnecessary adrenaline, which makes the brain hyperactive and unable to concentrate.
Yeah.
But too much adrenaline also makes us agitated and stressed. It's supposed to. Adrenaline is just supposed to help us in emergencies where we have to run, we have to fight.
Yeah. Escape the tiger.
So then we learned how to use tryptophan and GABA for people who were, overstressed and anxious and depressed and couldn't sleep. Tryptophan not only converts into our inner sunlight, which is called serotonin, our natural, antidepressant, but it also converts into melatonin. So
there we go. It helps you go to sleep.
Yes. So our days are lovely and our nights are lovely if we have plenty of tryptophan.
Tryptophan. Okay. And does GABA play into that too?
GABA reduces adrenaline so that if the tryptophan isn't enough, then the GABA will take care of the rest. And I learned that tyrosine could be so miraculous for attention deficit. But we got a boy who initially responded to it, but then it wasn't helping him so much. Fortunately, by that time, we had learned about how GABA could preserve our attention capacity by suppressing adrenaline. If adrenaline's not there, we think clearly. So his grandmother was sponsoring a conference on ADHD and asked me to come. But she also said, yeah, but tyrosine doesn't work. Do you have anything else to talk to us about? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And so I got to the conference. I invited him to come up to the stage. He was perfectly happy to do it.
Yeah.
And I said, I know that you have ADHD, and he nodded. And I know that the tyrosine helped at first, but it isn't anymore. And he nodded. And I said, I have another supplement for you that I think will be more helpful. And the thing that you have the worst time with is reading. And so I have found the most boring textbook that I have ever seen. And I have it with me. And after you've taken this supplement, I want you to see if you can read from. And so he took a 125 milligram chewable tablet of GABA with a peppermint flavor. And, I talked about, GABA and how it helps and so forth. And then I turned to him and said, are you ready to try reading? And he said, yes. And I handed him, a dusty tome I'd actually found in the back room of this conference center. And he read it.
He read it.
He read it effortlessly. And he just kept on reading, even though, even I didn't want to read it. It was so boring. So he was reading it to the whole conference.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. So that's GABA. And almost last, but very much not least, is our natural painkiller. And we tend to be aware of it, that the brain makes and body make endorphin, which is our natural opiate. So it kills pain. And that means that when we make enough of it, we have this natural sense of comfort. We don't need comfort food. We don't need heroin. We don't need a lot of the drugs like
Sugar.
THC,
Oh, THC.
always our natural opiate levels, and then they crash them down. So that was the next amino acid that we learned how to use. And in order to keep anyone, certainly anybody with ADHD, properly fueled, they need to want to eat good food. And without enough endorphin, you just don't enjoy it. The only things you enjoy are things that are high sugar.
Yeah. Because it does something to the brain, I think, right?
Oh, it does.
Yeah, it
Oh, it's
hijacks.
very, very powerful in the way it affects the endorphin production in the brain and suppresses it in the long run. Endorphin takes a lot of protein to make. And when you're eating sweets, you don't want to eat protein. And
Right.
protein is expensive, so they're not going to put it in junk food. They know that protein suppresses appetite. They want people to crave. So we have to counteract that by making people appreciate the taste of real food again. And we can do it with these supplements. And we've done it with thousands of people who've been addicted to ultra processed junk food. So we know that it works, but it has to be part of the therapy with these potent concentrates. So we give the potent concentrates between meals, but there have to be meals too. And one of them has to be breakfast. We've got to have the 3 squares, which is what we called our diet. That 3 squares diet before 1975, when we were encouraged to stop eating all the good stuff. So we need to reinstate the three
I
meals,
love the way 3 squares.
the 3 squares.
And then you can supplement too. In your book, The Mood Cure, you do have a checklist on like what are the symptoms, and then you give recommendations kind of based on the outcome of those surveys.
Yeah, it's a little 5-part symptom questionnaire, and you can go through it on my website. There's a
you have it on the website too.
Yes, there's a fillable questionnaire on the website, and we can actually analyze it for you and tell you, okay, you've got 3 exceptionally deficient areas. You've got 2 low areas, but 3 are really, severely depleted. And so that's something new that we've put into.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
It is. So they just fill out the questionnaire. We get the scores, and then we send them back an analysis. And so in just last year, I created a handbook, an e-publication, a short handbook to update the Mood Cure and the Diet Cure, which was my first book, in terms of instructions, how to take amino acids, which ones to take, how to interpret your own test result scores. And so there are a lot of resources on that website and in YouTube that I think people, there is one thing though that we haven't covered that's terribly important, and that is hypoglycemia. So the brain requires an extraordinary amount of fuel to run all these neurotransmitters and all these millions of cells running everything that goes on in the body. But we're not eating the kind of food that supplies what it needs. So the immediate effect when we either skip breakfast or we eat, all sugary stuff and a cup of coffee, is that initially the junk food raises blood glucose and we get a flood of all this glucose fuel that we need. But then the body becomes terrified, really. There's too much. And it sends out insulin to wipe it all out of the bloodstream and to store it as fat. So at that point, we become hypoglycemic. We don't have enough not enough blood sugar. So the brain begins to go into crisis mode. All of these neurotransmitters that are supposed to make us feel good, aren't enough of them. So all we do is crave, and we end up not with a meal, but going back and getting more junk food, more sugar.
Yeah.
So these low blood sugar states wear out the pancreas, which is what makes the insulin to try and keep things in balance. And that's where diabetes comes from. And that's why we have this epidemic of diabetes, but we have to stop it early on. By the time we become diabetic, oftentimes it's too late. Our pancreas doesn't work at all anymore. So what do we do? Well, it turns out we have a very, very simple amino acid solution to hypoglycemia. And the amino acid needed to re-regulate our blood sugar when it's dropped too low is called glutamine. Now, glutamine is such a potent healer as a standalone amino acid. In addition to regulating blood sugar, which is life-saving, it also basically cures the neuropathy caused by chemotherapy. It eliminates the cancer associated with AIDS. That's where we first found out how extraordinary it was. But among those of us who were interested in nutrition early on, we all knew about glutamine. Glutamine will make you stop craving sugar. That was the main thing we used it for. Then just recently, we've discovered that Ozempic, which is just a string of amino acids, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, which the body actually makes if it's got enough protein. And specifically, it needs enough glutamine. So this is a treasure of amino acid available cheaply everywhere. Bodybuilders take tubs of it to work because it helps to build up muscle so successfully. So we give anyone who scores high on that 5-part questionnaire with hypoglycemic symptoms. If you don't eat, do you feel miserable? Does your attention get worse? Do you get irritable? There are about 25 different symptoms of hypoglycemia.
Interesting. Yeah, which probably happens with kids too, ADHD kids too, with the met. If they're on any medication too, they're not hungry during the day. So you get
that's
them at
right.
the end of the day, you pick them up from school.
And all they want is sugar.
Yeah. And they're grumpy and they're highly irritable. Yeah. You need to shove a chicken breast at them.
Well, but the
turkey
beauty of
sandwich.
glutamine is that it actually tastes good. So you bring your supply in the glove compartment, you pick up the kid, you open up the glutamine and put it in their mouths. It tastes good. It's slightly sweet.
Okay.
Because it converts instantly in just enough glucose to raise those levels without making them so high that then we trigger insulin and we start this roller coaster going. Yeah. So glutamine is our friend, but it's not the only friend in terms of irritability. So that's a 6th topic that relates to particular type of ADHD that even when they do eat well and the blood sugar isn't a problem, they still have angry outbursts. And I observed this in a child in my own family. Suddenly was having daily outbursts for no reason whatsoever. The first time I happened to be there, and he just had a big lunch. It wasn't low blood sugar.
Yeah.
And it was, 20 years later that I understood that this particular type of anger combined with ADD or ADHD was a symptom of bipolar disorder. Now, keep in mind that bipolar disorder is a spectrum, bipolar spectrum disorder. So we have minor things and we have major things. And when we have at our clinic, we see people with this symptom and other symptoms of bipolar, but they're still functional. Their mood isn't very functional, but it's not that extreme.
Yeah.
And so what psychiatry has learned about bipolar spectrum, which they're not applying very well right now, but they're the people who pioneered it, is that the mineral lithium, it's an element, it's a nutrient. Another thing that we become very deficient in if we're not eating well. That deficiency is very definitely linked with bipolar disorder. So that's why lithium has for 60 years been the go-to medication for bipolar. Well, At this point, we have a very low dose version of tryptophan available over the counter. And just like with the amino acids, it has an immediate effect. So if you're wondering, does my child have the bipolar aspect to their ADHD? There's one quick way to help rule that out, and that is to give them a small amount of lithium. And Pure Encapsulations has a 1 milligram product, so very low dose, and you can start with a half a capsule. And it doesn't have a bad taste, and the effects are very, very clear.
So you'll know, like, if it
Oh,
helps their
yes.
mood.
Unmistakable. If the person, or a kid, whatever, has no effect, then you double it. So if you start them with a half a capsule, then give them the other half. And then, because what you want to know is, does it do something good or does it do nothing or something bad? If it does something bad, they won't like it and you won't use it anymore.
Yeah.
But
It does no harm.
it does no harm. And it's the same with the amino acids.
Yeah.
So the beauty of them, we can use them at very small doses. If we have a sensitive person or a child, we can use them at higher doses for people who need more, who are typically adults.
Who really need to, work on it. Okay, so here's my question. I'm thinking, as a parent, how do you figure out the brand of supplements? Does a parent need to be cautious about what brand they're using? Like, are there...
We have not found a lot of variety.
Okay.
They can order the supplements that we actually use in our clinic if they want to.
Okay, on the website.
On the website.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And we have the lithium as well. So we also have trialing kits. So they don't have to buy anything. They can just get a trialing kit.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And then they can sit down and have a little fun trialing session and make a list of the things that have positive. And they can always call us and get an assessment, and tell us what's happened with their own trialing and get some advice. But it's really something that anybody can approach safely that way.
Yeah, and slowly.
Yeah, you don't have to buy a whole bottle. You can just try one at a time in these little capsules in the sample packet.
Okay, and what if a kid doesn't want to take capsules? What if that's the thing? Can you open them and put them in juice or something?
Yeah, you can put them in juice. You can put them in Jello. You can put them in mashed, applesauce.
Yeah. Okay.
And some of them, like glutamine, tastes fine. They don't mind that at all. But tyrosine is pretty bad, and tryptophan's pretty bad.
Okay. So if they're capsule adverse, you can be creative on how you get it into them. And then if there's higher dosing too, that was the other thing. If there's higher dosing that you need to do, let's say the mood is really on that spectrum and you need to do higher dosing of things, you can do that by opening the capsules versus having them take so many capsules at one time.
Oh, yes. And that has very little taste. So there's a psychiatrist, James Greenblatt, who is now fully operational as an expert on the use of nutrients for all kinds of conditions. And he has a wonderful book, finally focused on ADHD. And he talks about the nutrients I've talked about, as well as other nutrients. And he gives free seminars. And so I encourage people. I just want to say that he tends to be extremely conservative on dosing, and we haven't found that's necessary. Okay. So he might, giving very small doses, he might not get any benefit for weeks, whereas we get immediate benefits. But he, wants to be safe. He's a psychiatrist, and this is a new, venture. But he's very well worth your audience exploring.
Yeah, great. Okay, Julie, you have been a wealth of information. I think you've done a wonderful job educating us as when the basic treatment, isn't always successful, which is medication and therapy, which is kind of like not even a thing when the child is young and developing and just trying to get through school. So I think you've given us a great case of understanding how nutrition and these amino acids can really help support our brains to work better.
We might talk just for a minute about, well, what if they're on the medication already? And you're not really sure, is it helping? You know that it's, preventing them from eating and they're maybe too hyper, whatever. There's a lot of doubt, and trial and error in this,
Yeah.
among all these medications and so forth. So let's take a break. 5 hours away, 4 or 5 hours, 4 hours is fine, away from the time they took their medication. Then you can trial them on the amino acids. And if they get focused on the amino acids, then you can talk to the doctor and say, I'd like him to go off the medication. Would you suggest how he might do it? And then we'll try these, more long term and see whether they would work on their own or whether we should combine them. Maybe.
Yeah. Sometimes from my experience too, is that it can be less meds, right? Less dependent on the meds. Yeah. Yes. And really create a healthier combination of everything to help your child thrive.
Yes, and help you survive. So I want parents also to be aware that the amino acid for anxiety and depression, the tryptophan, and especially if you're not sleeping, use it yourself. Use the GABA for it's just a miracle for relieving stress.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I think that kind of a standard care of treatment that's out there right now is melatonin for sleep.
Mm-hmm. Well, melatonin is made out of serotonin, tryptophan. So
yeah,
tryptophan, so they could try tryptophan first, is my advice.
Yeah.
And if it's not strong enough, or they're having some difficulty converting it, then if melatonin, great. But see, with tryptophan, you get not only the sleep benefit by the conversion to melatonin, but you get all these mood,
yeah,
and ADD effects.
Yeah.
And you can do both. You can take tryptophan in the daytime for the mood and take the melatonin at night.
Yeah. And if you don't want to try, I always hear from some parents, they're, weary of taking melatonin, that this is another option to try to help build the melatonin in their child's brain.
Yeah. And to be able to cut back on the stimulants.
Yeah.
Make sleep so different.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You've been a wealth of information.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. I will put the link to your website and your books and all of that in the show notes so people can easily find you. But it has been a pleasure to have you, and I really appreciate this.